Welcome to this video on using the Terraform Registry. Now in this video, I'm not going to do any slides whatsoever. This video is going to be purely an exercise that we're going to walk through together in order to consume modules straight from the Terraform Registry. Now on the screen here, I have VS Code and I am connected to a empty directory on my machine. So the first thing I'm going to do is go over here and just create our main.tf file. I'll go ahead and create a variables.tf, and I will go ahead and create a providers.tf as well. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the Terraform registry and we're going to look at the different modules that are available, right? So let's go over here to the Terraform registry. Now this should look fairly familiar to you because, well, we looked at the Terraform registry when we were looking at the documentation, and more specifically, we're looking at the providers. So after those initial hands-on labs, we looked at the providers, we looked at all the resources inside those providers, we looked at those resources and the data sources inside to understand where we can find all those types of resources for each provider. Now, the Terraform registry is a great place to find modules as well. Now, people can write modules and they can publish them to the Terraform registry, and then we, as users of Terraform, well, we can simply consume those modules and we don't have to go out and write modules ourselves. Now, the Terraform registry is probably the easiest way to grab modules from a Terraform registry. However, if you use something like HCP Terraform, or if you use Terraform Enterprise, you also have something called the private registry, and that's a part of that specific product, and that allows you to publish modules directly to a private registry that only your organization can consume. So it's not public, it's only for your organization. So you can add a little bit more in there in terms of sensitive information in terms of your organization. Nobody else will be able to use that. However, when you create and publish a module to the Terraform registry, the public one that we're looking at, obviously you want to anonymize it and you want to make it, so anyone can use it. Okay, so on the registry here, you can see right here in the middle, we can click on Browse Modules right here. We could also search for it at the top, but I'm going to click on Browse Modules so we can see what it looks like. Now over on the left, we have the most popular providers. So we have Alibaba, AWS, Azure, Console, Nomad, Vault, etc. There's also a list of providers right here in the middle that are popular. So if you scroll down, you can see things like Terraform AWS modules, right? There's a lot of Terraform in here. Here's some GCP modules, right? There's 2,127 pages currently for modules. So there's 19,142 public modules that you can consume straight from the Terraform registry. So in reality, you probably never need to use a resource block again because you can simply consume all the modules out of the Terraform registry if you wanted to. Now what we're going to do in this exercise is I'm just going to use Terraform, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a VPC, and then we're also going to create a subnet or two in that VPC. And we're going to see how we can pull in data between those modules. And again, inside of our configuration, we're not going to write a single resource block. We're going to allow the module to create the resources for us. We're simply going to create our parent or our calling or our root module, and we're going to call the child modules to create our resources for us. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to go grab this VPC module. So I'm going to click on this module here. And just like the provider, you have information about this specific provider. You can see the current version. You can see the downloads, right? This week, 280,000, 112 million downloads overall. But just like the providers, you get some provider instructions, right? But just like those providers, you also get instructions on how to use this specific module. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just copy this right here. And I'm going to copy that. Let's go back over to our main, and I'm just going to paste it in. So this is very basic, right? We could actually use this. I could go in there and run a Terraform init and an apply, and it would probably create a module for us. It's going to use any of the defaults, but we would create a module. However, we want to customize this, okay? So let's go back over to the module, and I want to show you a few things here. Scroll down just a little bit. There's a README, so as you go down, there's a lot of information about the module here. But the one thing I really wanted to point out is the inputs right here and the outputs. All right. Now inputs, look, there's 234 optional inputs for this module. Now we're not going to use 234. We're going to use maybe 3 or 4, maybe a little bit more than that. Definitely not 234. But you can see the flexibility of a module is I can input a ton of different things into this module, and I can get completely different resources that are created on the other end simply by changing the inputs into this module. So again, this is why modules are so important and critical, because we can simply change the inputs of what we pass into the module, and the module creates completely different resources for us based upon that information. Now we also have outputs. So in the last videos, we saw that how we can use modules and we can pass outputs back to our parent module. And of course, we can use those inside of other modules or outputs or wherever we need. So these are two really important pieces here. If you click on inputs, if you go down, notice that there are no required inputs. It goes straight to optional inputs. Okay, so all of these are actually optional for us. So you've got things like, AZs, you've got the CIDR block that we saw in some of the examples I was showing earlier. We've got things like, create an internet gateway. Do we want to do that? Customer gateways. There's all kinds of stuff in here. Now, if you're not familiar with AWS, that's totally fine. It's not meant to teach AWS by any means, but I just want to show you how you consume a module. All right, so the first thing we do is we grabbed our configuration for our module. Now let's go back over here and let's go ahead and define a few variables here. So I'm gonna make this just a little bit bigger so it's easier to read depending on the device that you are on. And I'm going to say variable, and let's just call this CIDR block. So we're going to define the value for our IP addresses for our VPC. So I'll do type equals string, and then I can add a description, say this is the IP address range for our VPC. Great. And I can even add a default value in here. And let's go ahead and add 192.168.0.0/16. And I want to use 192.168 because that is different than the default. If you go back over here and you click on inputs and we go down to CIDR, notice that it does have a default of 10.16. So what I want to show is that our VPC gets created with 192 because I'm passing in that information. Okay. Now, if we scroll down here, we can see some more information about the inputs. I'm not sure what else we want to add. Maybe we can add some tags. We can add some route tables. Let's see, what else do we want to add in here? Let's go down a little bit further. There's so many. There's 234 of these inputs in here. Let's add the name in here. So here's the name. Again, here's the description, the name to reuse on all the resources and identifier. Notice the default is just 2 double quotes. That means it's a empty string. Okay, so by default, we do not have a name. So let's add a name to ours. So let's create another variable. Let's just call this VPC name. By the way, I am purposely naming these something different than what the module is expecting because I want you to see where we pull in our information as opposed to the name that we must pass into our variable. So VPC name, again, we could do type equals string here. We can do description and we say the name of our VPC. And then we can give it a default as well. And we can just call this my Terraform VPC. How about that? Cool. So we've got 2 variables that we can use inside of our resource here. So let's go ahead and pass those in. So if I hit enter down here and we go back over to our module, again, it's going to expect that we pass in a variable called name if we want to set name. So the first thing is we're going to type in name because that's what it's expecting. We're going to say name equals, and we have a variable, so var.vpc name. All right, so again, this is the name, this is the string that the module is expecting. This is the value in our root module that we want to pass it. All right, so we're going to pass it that name. Finally, let's go back over here. I believe it's just CIDR. Let's see. Let's go back up further. I try to search for it, but there's so many things that have the word CIDR in here. And there we go. Yeah, so it's just CIDR right here. So let's go back over here. CIDR equals, and then that's going to be our variable.CIDR block. Great. Now we can also add tags and things like that in here, but again, I want to keep it pretty simple. So now we've got our configuration. Let's go back over to our registry. I'm going to look up the AWS provider here. We're going to click on this, and I'm going to say use provider. Again, I'm just kind of showing you, again, reminding you that we can get this information rather than having to type it back out. We can go in here, required providers. We can use the latest version, and I'm not going to add anything in here except for maybe I'll add the region in here. I'm just going to do US East 1. Great. And that's pretty much it for using our module. Now, again, notice in our main.tf, we don't have a resource block in here. However, we're going to use our module. Our module has a resource block, and it's going to create our VPC. To see what the module looks like, if you go back over here, let's go to VPC again and find that right here. Let's see, modules right here, this one. There's a source code link right here, so you can actually see the source code for this module. So if I click on this, it's going to go right to GitHub, and GitHub's going to have a lot of information in here, right? But again, we talked about what modules usually contain. It contains a main.tf, it contains an output.tf, and it contains a variables.tf. That's exactly what we just saw in our slides. Now it has a few others as well, but for the most part, this is what you're going to see in most of your modules: a main, an outputs, and a variables. Okay. If you click on main, what you're going to see is a bunch of locals here. Here is our resource block, and notice everything in here is a variable, because we are going to pass everything as a variable, okay? So again, we have tags, we have different resource blocks in here, and a lot of these are using counts. They're saying, okay, if I added or passed in a specific variable, then go create this, otherwise it doesn't create it, etc. All right, so that's how you actually see what the code looks like by going into the actual GitHub repo, and you can see what that module actually looks like. Okay, let's go back over here, and we're ready to go. We've got our main, we've got our providers, and we have our variables. So what I'm going to do is right click and open in an integrated terminal. And the first thing that I need to do is I need to add my credentials for my AWS account. So let me go do that really quickly, and I'll just cut that out of the video. All right, so I've got my credentials. I'm going to paste those in and hit enter, and I'll clear the screen here. So now I have my credentials as environment variables. So the first thing we can do now is a Terraform init, and hit enter. Notice a few things that might be a little bit different. First of all, it's going to initialize the back end, and look at that, initializing modules. It's actually downloading, let's scroll back up here. It's actually downloading our module right here. So it says downloading from registry.terraform.io. Well, that's exactly where we were. And if you look at the link, Terraform AWS modules, VPC, etc. Well, that's exactly where we were at right here. Terraform modules, right? So it downloaded it straight from the Terraform registry. Then it downloaded our provider plugin, so it went and found our AWS provider, so it matched the version, grabbed the latest version, and we're good to go. So if you look up here in the Terraform directory, if you click on this arrow, notice that now we have providers, and notice now we have modules. If I open up our modules, you can see our VPC module in here, and it downloaded everything from that GitHub repo, from the Terraform registry, and then we have our get rid of that. Then we have our providers for a Terraform provider for AWS. Okay, so this is where your modules are going to be stored inside of your .terraform directory underneath of modules right here. Before we only had providers, now we have modules. All right, so just want to point that out. So we have run a Terraform init. Let's clear the screen here. Terraform plan. Great. 4 to add. We're going to add 4 resources here. Let's look up to see what those resources are going to be. The top here. So it looks like we're going to create a default network, right? All these are part of that module. We're going to create default route table, which is pretty normal. We're going to create a default security group, and then we're going to actually create the VPC itself. Okay, great. So that's exactly what we wanted. Now what we can do is run a Terraform apply. And then we're going to say yes. So it's going to go out and create those for us. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the And what I'll do is we'll go over to AWS and see those created. Okay, so it is done. It's created all of our resources. Again, really cool way to create resources. Again, if in our main, we don't have any resource blocks in here, right? We only have a module. So pull this back up. Now let's go over to AWS and see our resources. So if we do a Terraform state list, we can actually see information about the resources that we're managing. And then this module VPC, AWS VPC, right? Again, we called it my VPC, actually, and we called it my Terraform VPC. So let's go over to AWS and see if we can find that one. So over in AWS, I've got it up here. We're in US East 1. I'm going to go to VPC at the top. Make that a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. And I've got 5 VPCs in here. I don't know what they are, but my Terraform VPC. So there's the VPC that we just created using our module here. If we look at our tags, we don't have any tags. We have our name, my Terraform VPC. And if we look at information about this specific VPC, you can see right here, 192.168.0.0. Again, we passed that in from our parent module into the child module to ensure that we actually set the CIDR block for our VPC. All right, so a really cool way to consume those modules from the public Terraform registry and create your resources for you. Now we're gonna take it one more step here. What I want to do is I want to now add an output. So if we go to main.here, and actually let's go ahead and create an outputs.tf. And in here, I'm gonna create a new output. So a new output block, VPC ID. And the value for this is going to be module.vpc dot, and then we're going to find ID down here. Let's see if we can find it. Somewhere in this, I think it's just VPC underscore ID, I believe. VPC underscore ID, and there it is. Yep, perfect. So that's what we want. So to find your outputs here, we can go back over to the Terraform registry, go into your outputs, and you can see all the outputs. So we can grab any of these outputs that we want to. Let's scroll all the way down to the bottom. There's a bunch of them. And you can see we have VPC ID right here. All right, so this is the VPC ID that it's going to pass back to our parent module, and that's what we want. So let's go over here. It's not default VPC, it is just VPC ID. So now when we rerun this, we should get the VPC ID out. We should get the VPC ID outputted into the console itself. So if we do a Terraform apply and hit enter, now nothing's going to change, but it's going to add our output. So we're going to say yes. And there we go. So we just outputted the VPC ID. Again, this VPC ID was outputted from our module. And because the value is module.vpc, again, that's in our main, right? Module.vpc right here. And then we're grabbing one of the outputs from that module, VPC ID. Perfect. So we know that we can already grab the VPC ID. All right, so let's take this one step closer. Now that we know we have the VPC ID that we can output, maybe we can input that into another resource. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go back over here and let's find, let's say, security group. All right, security groups are going to be linked to a specific VPC, so we can pass that in. So again, we can grab our module right here, go back over here and add that. So module security group, this is where it's going to grab it. We're going to use version 5.3.0, that's the latest version, and we need to pass it some information. So let's go back over to security group. Let's look at our inputs, and they are pretty much all optional. So let's scroll down here and find VPC, probably at the very bottom here, VPC ID. And that's the input that we need. So we can copy that, go back over here. VPC ID is going to equal, well, it's going to equal the same thing as our output over here, right? So module right here, go back over to main and add that in. And so what we're doing is Terraform will go create this VPC. We're going to output. So Terraform will go create this VPC. Terraform module, the Terraform module will export that value back to us. And again, we already saw that we can see that by outputting it to the terminal. But now for this module, we can pass in the output into this module and to go create a security group. All right, so let's go ahead and check that out. Let's go ahead and pass name in too. That way, I'm sure name is something we'll do my cool security group, just something different. And let's go over here to make sure name is name. I'm sure it's going to be, we got rules. Let's just find, see if we can find name real quick. There we go, name. So description, name of the security group, great. So that's what we want. I'm just gonna hard code that in there instead of creating a variable. You get the point. We can create a variable, obviously, or use interpolation to create that specific name, but I'm just gonna hard code it in there just for this example. Now we can go in here, and the first thing we need to do is, now that we added a new module, if I were to run a Terraform plan again, it's going to complain to me. It's gonna say, I don't know what that module is. Watch. Terraform, actually let's clear the screen here. Terraform plan. See, module is not installed. Because we added a new module, a separate module, it's actually gonna tell you to go ahead and run Terraform init. So anytime you add a new module, you're gonna run a Terraform init, and that gives Terraform the opportunity to go download that module locally. Okay, so if we go to Terraform up here again, click on modules, now we have the security group module downloaded locally for us. Perfect. So clear the screen out. Terraform, let's go straight to Terraform apply. Great, it's a refreshing state of our existing VPC. Yes, we want to go ahead and add our one security group right here. Hit enter. It's going to create our security group. Perfect. So it has created our security group. We still outputted our VPC here, and that was used as an input for our security group. So we go back over to AWS, and we go over to security groups, and we refresh right here, and here is our new security group right here, my cool security group. And let's compare. If we pull this back up, we can look at our VPC right here, VPC 0C11. If I click on that, that should be my Terraform VPC. So again, what we did in our code here is very important. We use the outputs from our VPC, and we pass that output into another module in order to create another resource. So this is a way, again, you can pass data between modules by way of the root or the parent module in order to continue creating more and more resources that are generally aligned and used together. All right. Now the last thing we can do is, well, if we want to look at information about our security group, maybe we want to output the ID of that. Let's go back over to our security group module and scroll up here. Again, if you look at outputs, well, we're only outputting 6 different things from this module. All right, we've got the name, we've got the ID, the description, etc. We want the ID maybe. So I'm going to copy that. Maybe we want the ID because, well, we want to deploy a virtual machine, an EC2 instance as well, and we want to use this particular security group. So we go to outputs. We can simply add a new output right here, and we'll call this SG name, SGID, actually. Oh, autocomplete's getting me there. And the value is going to be module.security group in this case, because we're outputting it from a security group, not the VPC, but the security group dots, and then the name here. Actually, we wanted the ID, didn't we? ID. Perfect. So now we can output the ID of that security group. So if I go back up here and clear the screen, Terraform apply. Now the only thing we're adding is an output. We didn't add anything in our module. Yes, so we're gonna have 2 outputs now. We're gonna have our new security group ID that's passed back from that module, and now we have our VPC ID that's passed back from the other module. Okay, so again, hopefully this was useful for you. I wanted to make this a coding exercise so you can kind of see real world, like how do I consume these modules from the Terraform registry. Again, we went through all of the documentation, understanding the inputs and the outputs, and then we know how we can pass in our data into a module, create the resources, and then export data back into our parent module in order to either use for an output for the terminal, like we did right here, or to use as an input for another module, just like we did right here. All right, go out, play with the Terraform registry, grab the modules that you want to create. It's going to make it a lot easier for you because look at this. I mean, this is pretty easy, right, for just creating a pretty complex resource by simply just passing in a few values. Let somebody else do the work of writing all those complex resource blocks, and you can simply consume them from the Terraform registry. All right, so hopefully that was helpful for you, and we'll see you in the next video.